Up, 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 up. Well then, we're on to our final route, which is Chizuru Yukimura. I don't know how long this is gonna last, but we'll see. Let's see what our protagonist's own route is, because I don't know. Yukimura's story is about to begin. Proceed? Yes. Huh! It's a boat. Winter 1864. In order to find my father with whom I lost contact, I, Chizuru Yukimura, visited Kyo. In that city, I bore witness to a horrifying secret hidden within a group called the Shinsengumi, the Fury, a creature with white hair and crimson eyes. Luckily, I was saved from the vicious clutches of the Furies by Saito-san and Okita of the Shinsengumi. Because I had discovered the Shinsengumi secrets, it was proposed that I live with the Shinsengumi men since they were also searching for my father. As such, I was to serve under Hijikata-san as the commander's page, a role I performed proudly. So thus began my life with the Shinsengumi. I'd heard rumors, well, whispers really, that the Shinsengumi was little more than a bunch of crooked ronin, but my life with them proved otherwise. The commitment to protect the safety of Kyo made them the last of a dying breed, true samurai. It set them apart from those who only crave power. I remember one such time where 3 men claiming to be demons, Shikage Kazuma, Kyuju Amagiri, and Kyo Shiranui, confronted the Shinsengumi. I discovered that I, too, was of demon lineage, which explained why they'd been pursuing me. I had also met Sen, a young, charismatic princess in Kyo, who revealed to me the secrets of my birth and inspired me to learn more about my people. Our situation, however, became increasingly dire. Anti-shogunate sentiments were growing intensely throughout the country, and the war between the shogunate and the Sacho seemed inevitable. Then finally the Battle of Toba Fushimi had begun. Without any expertise on the battlefield, I worked in Osaka Castle's infirmary, and the Sacho were victorious. Genzaburo Inoue, Susumu Yamazaki, and many others were taken from us in battle. Hijikata-san decided to put forth all efforts into retaliating against the Imperial Army, urged me to forge my own path away from the Shinsengumi. Alright, how does this go? I will be drinking a lot of water because this route is a lot of reading. Welp! Yukimura's route started. Okay! That's the achievement, I guess. Just welp! January 1868. I greeted the shores of Edo with dragged feet and a heavy heart alongside the downtrodden men of the Shinsengumi. Fearing to incur the wrath of Hijikata-san during our final moments in Osaka Bay, I did as he told and returned to my old home, located in Edo's quaint outskirts. My childhood home had grown dilapidated, having been neglected for over 4 years with overgrown weeds and unkempt shrubbery covering the yard. Better now. After spending my first tape back tidying up, I sat on a woven cushion, taking a moment to catch my breath. My heart felt weary as the silence tickled my ears. Ever since father had gone missing and I had taken a long-distance trip to Kyo, I felt at odds with the world, alone and carrying my cumbersome thoughts. In the moment, they were particularly distracting. First, I contemplated the fates of those who were injured during the Battle of Toba Fushimi. When I last saw Okita, tightly bundled in sheets in a bed on the return ship. His body was pale, gaunt, and tattered, unlikely to ever wield a sword again. Oops. Even now, in the eerie solitude of my home, I couldn't help but shake the memory of my time with the Shinsengumi, however far away they were. I pursed my lips, watching the outside scenery. A familiar voice called out to me from the entrance. After shaking free of my stupor, I rushed outside. Sen and Kimigiku? What are you two doing here?
この間、新選組の土方さんから手紙をもらったのよ。島原のお菊宛てにね。
Oi! To Kimigiku?
はい。今後あなたのことをよろしく頼むと。
Alright, that's sweet.
あなたを一人にしておくと、また風間が来るかもしれないから。そのことを心配して私たちに声をかけてくれたんじゃないかしら。それに光道さんの行方も探さなきゃならないものね。
I see.
私たちが来たからには安心してくれていいわよ。
Oh, right. Thank you, Sen. Though I was discouraged by the notion that I would no longer spend time with the Shinsengumi men, it was for the best, and I found myself relieved that I was in no position to cause trouble for the Shinsengumi by attracting the likes of Kazuma.
行動さんの行方は今私たちが手を尽くして探しています。何か分かりましたらすぐお知らせしますので。
Thank you.
それじゃあ今日はこれで失礼するわね。また来るわ。
I'll see you soon. (1868). It's March. From time to time, Sen and Kimigiku interrupted my bouts of loneliness with surprise visits, but my father's whereabouts, perhaps expectedly, were still an enigma, and each visit brought less joy. March arrived and spring along with it, filling the air with fragrant reminders of seasons long since past. Oh, it's Hijikata! Oh my goodness, Hijikata-san! One moment please, I'll be right out. I ran frantically to the entrance, practically gliding across the tatami mat as I slid the door wide open. An old friend was standing to greet me.
なんだその顔は。この格好がそんなにおかしいか?
No, of course not. It's not bad, at all, really. It's just... I barely recognized Hijikata-san, who was clad in a well-tailored black coat with gold trimmings and his family crest emblazoned on the front. His hair, once flowy and bound into a ponytail, was trimmed short, hanging just above his shoulders. He gazed at me with somber eyes, which had been my truest indication that the man in front of me was, in fact, Toshizo Hijikata.
新政府軍の奴らと戦うため、甲府に行くことになってな。今回から皆様相に改めることになった。
そうか。While keeping one ear fixed on what Hijikata-san was saying, I took pleasure in briefly visualizing how the rest of the troop may have looked in new uniforms.
鳥羽伏見の戦の時は、薩長の新型武器にやられちまったからな。同じ鉄は踏まねえさ。
AI returns. Remembrance of their defeat was fresh in Hijikata-san's eyes, which he calmly averted to the side as he spoke. Both Inoue and Yamazaki-san, whose lives were tragically stolen during the Battle of Toba Fushimi, seemed to smile at me as I distracted myself with their memory. You don't think you will lose the next one, do you?
負けるわけにはいかねえさ。ようやく戦う機会が巡ってきたんだからな。
The curtness of Hijikata-san's response gave me some relief, though only just a tad.
千姫って言ったか。あの女から連絡はあったか。
She visits me from time to time.
そうか。それならよかった。あの二人も行動さんの行方を探してるみてえだし。行動さん、早く見つかるといいな。そんじゃ、俺はもう行くが。達者でやれよ。
Okay. Please send everyone my regards.
ああ、伝えとくぜ。皆お前のことを気にしてたからな。
Ow! Without another word, Hijikata-san spun around and sauntered away from my doorstep. Leaves crackled underneath his wide footsteps, and as his back grew smaller in the distance, I couldn't help but tear my eyes away. Long after he was no longer visible, I kept my gaze fixed, waiting for the amber sun to set. Not April! Oh, this is... An entire month had passed since Hijikata-san's visit. April 1868. Rumors floated around, sifting through the rustling trees, carrying word that Edo Castle had surrendered to the Imperial Army without much resistance. Matsumoto-sensei had reached out to me in a letter, informing me of the finer details of this terrible blow. The Shinsengumi, still licking their wounds from the loss at Toba Fushimi, endured another humiliating defeat at the hands of the Imperial Army in Kofu. Now that anti-shogunate sentiments had almost entirely taken control of Edo, there was no space for them, and they decided to relocate to Aizu. What remained of my optimism stirred in my restless heart when I read word of the Shinsengumi's loss. Many either left for Aizu or departed the Shinsengumi altogether, evidenced by their former headquarters, which belonged to the city's Hadamoto, being vacated. And one evening a cool breeze whistled in my home. I finished my tea and prepared myself to sleep in my futon when footsteps startled me awake. Sen's voice echoed from nearby my front door, and I quickly lifted the futon cover and ran to meet her. Sen, what's wrong? It's rather late, isn't it?
夜分遅くにごめんなさい。どうしてもあなたに知らせなきゃならないことがあって。中で話してもいいかしら。人には聞かれたくないから。
Yes, of course. Please come inside. So, what did you want to discuss?
新政府軍が江戸にやってきてから、市中におかしな噂が流れてるみたいなの。
Rumors?
ええ。白い髪の化け物が夜な夜なさまよい歩いて人を襲うって噂よ。
Could it be?
最初は私も新選組の羅刹隊の人たちの仕業かと思ったんだけど。
There's a plane. It's gone.
彼らはもう江戸を出ているはずよね。
I struggled to imagine why the Fury Courts would travel back to Edo of all places, simply to feed, and Sen tilted her head as she watched me contemplate. It was dangerous for the Shinsengumi here, doubly so during evenings in which Imperial soldiers kept almost every street corner under tight patrol.
これは憶測なんだけど、新選組の羅刹隊とは別の羅刹が新政府軍と一緒に江戸に来たってことは考えられないかしら。
Another set of Furies? As the meaning of Sen's words sank in, I suddenly recalled a faint memory and audibly gasped. It was something that hadn't been brought to my attention since I resided in Kyo. Father having offered his set of skills to many suitors, often associated with Imperial nationalist warriors. Sen. Could it be?
断言はできないけど、その公算は高いと思うの。高堂さんなら落ち水のことをよく知っているはずだし、新選組の人たちの前から姿を消した後、羅刹を使って西国の藩に取り入ったとしたら。
My body went numb, as if all of my blood had drained from out of my feet, and I trembled from nervousness. My father, who had previously dedicated his life to treating patients from deadly illnesses, was now... I stopped myself from entertaining the thought, reluctant to believe father was capable of that. But I hesitated just as easily to think that Sen would voice her speculations without any grounds. So had father actually...
ごめんなさい。 あなたに知らせるべきじゃなかったわね。
Oh, please, it's nothing like that. My voice trailed off and silence hovered between us.
市中を騒がせている羅刹たちの居場所をお菊に調べてもらったの。確かめるのが怖いって言うなら私たちだけで行ってくるわ。でも
Before Sen had a chance to finish, I cut her off and offered her the first thing that came to mind. Sen, I humbly ask that you allow me to join you.
千鶴ちゃん。
Sen was taken aback, her eyes widening upon hearing my sudden request. I would have been lying if I said that I wasn't scared to witness the murders with my own eyes. But I needed to overcome my fear because if it truly is my father's committing these crimes, then as his daughter, I share the burden of stopping him. Sen probed me with a long, drawn-out stare, curling her lips curiously to examine my sincerity. Eventually, she replied,
わかったわ。あなたのことは私とお菊で守るから安心してね。
Thank you, Sen. Oh boy. I got into a new change of clothes and Sen led me to a rendezvous point to meet up with Kimigiku. Father had been allegedly hiding within an old abandoned Hanamoto mansion.
お二人ともこちらへ。見張りの目につかぬ入り口を見つけてありますので。
さすが手回しがいいわね。助かるわ。
Kimigiku beckoned us along a dimly lit path, and she opened a hatch leading into the mansion, but
これは
something foul greeted us as we stepped inside. It took us a moment to gather ourselves as we were at a loss for words once the stench hit our noses. Fresh blood covered every surface of the room's stark interior. As I lifted my foot, it felt stuck to the floor. Corpses, disfigured and eviscerated, lined the walls, and strands of white hair were all over the room.
白髪に赤い瞳。この屋敷に隠れてた羅刹に間違いないわね。
どの者も心臓一突きにされるか首を落とされて事切れています。
こんなことができるのはあいつしかいないわよね。
Just then, Kimigiku perked up and stopped dead in her tracks, putting one finger over her lips.
お二人ともお静かに。
Kimigiku tiptoed slyly to the sliding door. She carefully reached her hand over to the handle. As she slid it open, there stood a familiar, haunting face.
来たのか、雪村の娘。
Kazuma. I cupped my hand in shock. I cupped my mouth in shock. As I wondered to myself why Kazuma had come here, the question was quickly answered for me. Just as I thought I had seen it all, another familiar face entered the room, shortly before collapsing to the floor with a dull, resounding thud. Oh. I wish for all of this to be a nightmare. However, there was no mistaking the face, and as the body sat there, unmoved with a thickening pool of blood, I realized that it was Father! I kneeled to the ground, delicately rolling his body over to where I could see his face. His eyes, however, were glassy and devoid of life, and his skin was icy to the touch. Even so, with his limp, lacerated body held snugly in my meek arms, I desperately denied the idea that my father was no longer alive. Father, Father, please, you must hang in there. No matter how many times I called his name or shook his body, there was no response.
無駄だ、やめておけ。すでに息はない。
Cosmo muttered nonchalantly, sneering as I shot him a seething glare. I could barely eke out a word without trembling from anger. Why did you kill him? In my rage, these words were all I could muster.
その男は羅刹という芸道の策を用い、新政府に取り入ろうとしていた。人の世の歴史に関わってはならぬというのが鬼の掟のはず。故にこの俺の手で悲願へと送ってやったまでだ。異論はあるか
？I turned over to Sen.
風間の言うことは間違ってはいないわ。
I got problems with this role, but we'll get to it when we get to it. Things were becoming blurry in front of me. Father, who had raised me on his own with an abundance of love, was executed by Kazuma for his sins, given no chance to explain himself, no clarify his intentions.
父を殺した俺が憎いのならば、いつでも殺しに来るがいい。
Kazuma smugly puffed his shoulders up and walked past us without even waiting for a response.
千鶴ちゃん、ごめんなさい。何もできなくて。あいつも行動さんを探してるって分かってたはずだったのに。
Sen was sincere in her apology, widening her eyes with sympathy as she tried grabbing my attention. But I couldn't bear to look at her. Instead, I kept my father's cold, lifeless hand clutched close to my chest. Afterwards, we bundled my father's remains, and the next day made an approach to a nearby temple to hold a memorial service in his honor. How could father, after years of self-service and thoughtful parenting, violate the natural order of his people and delve too deeply into the Furies? Without him present to answer my questions, they flew into the void, along with his ever-fading memory. Another drink, Father? You know that drinking too much isn't healthy for you.
千鶴、今日だけは飲ませてくれないか。
Is this, about the patient who passed away recently?
ああ、仕方ないことだというのは分かっているんだが、何の罪もない幼子が死ぬのを目にするのは答えるものだな。千鶴、お前がまだ幼かった頃のことを思い出すよ。
Huh? Why? Had I contracted measles when I was younger too, Father?
いや、そうではない。
After Father tipped the sake cup into his mouth, emptying its contents in one swift gulp, he continued musing as if he were talking to himself.
善行を成した者が必ずしも大往生を遂げるわけではない。悪行を成した者が必ずその報いを受けるわけでもない。そんなことをつい思ってしまってね。
Father. I opened my eyes and a dark, nondescript ceiling appeared overhead. That was a dream. My eyes throbbed from soreness as a stream of tears dripped down my hot cheeks. I loved Father, faults and all. He had never turned away a single patient, nor had he skimped anyone on the attention they deserved. It was impossible to deconstruct my perceptions of him, just as it was hard to imagine that someone of his nature could perform deprived, unthinkable acts. In the end, he was a victim of circumstance, One that had been decided by Kazuma, of all people. As I spilled my grief through these analytical thoughts, my throat felt parched, and I went to the kitchen to get myself a glass of water. Getting myself back into my futon was proving difficult, so instead I awaited the sunrise, basking in its warm glow, alone and with an untied heart.
善行を成した者が必ずしも大往生を遂げるわけではない。悪行を成した者が必ずその報いを受けるわけではない。
What is this going to mean in the long run? Let's see.
そんなことをつい思ってしまってね。
A thought came to mind, one that hadn't, in any way, been corroborated by my father, but a connection. I connected the dots, realizing that he may have been referring to the destruction of my clan at the hands of wildly enraged humans. I wondered to myself why father hadn't ever mentioned anything about our heritage or about the death of our people in conversation with me. Perhaps it was a trauma too difficult to bear, and he would only reveal them to me when I came of age. Alas, the answer never came to me. I went into town hoping to purchase some fresh produce and ingredients for dinner when... Oh, I don't like this. I think I know what this is. And I'm not happy about it right now. Because this is gonna hurt! A flashy block print seller was busy on the street corner, hollering out to passerby. I hadn't expressed any interest in purchasing one, and was on my way to pass by him when... Huh? I stopped at once. Then I heard the news. My heart skipped a beat, and suddenly the rest of my body felt numb from shock. What did that man just say? My knees buckled, and before nearly crumpling to the ground, I snatched one of the woodblock prints. Etched onto the print was an illustration of Kondo with both hands tied behind him, wearing funeral attire. My mouth fell agape in disbelief. Townspeople gawked at my display as they passed me. Another injustice befallen onto one of the kindest men I had ever known, Kondo-san. I felt immeasurable guilt, as he was offered no chance at an honorable death through seppuku. Instead, he was executed like a criminal, and his name was spat upon. I wondered if Hijikata-san, or any of the other Shinsengumi men, had any idea of his execution. There's no fathomable explanation for how Hijikata-san could let such a thing happen. It wasn't until an entire month later that I received any correspondence in the form of a letter. As expected, it was from Matsumoto-sensei. He wrote that he was headed for Aizu in order to join the war front and treat some of the casualties. From the contents of the letter, I'd gathered that the Shinsengumi were fighting gallantly in Aizu, but... By the time my eyes reached the end of the letter, I froze reading the sentence again and again. Okita, who had been bedridden on account of his crippling tuberculosis, had finally passed away in his sleep. He was alone, staying in a reclusive spot in Sendagaya. Why? I felt my throat tighten, and I screamed in despair. Now, not only have we lost Kondo-san, but we lost Okita too! The person most capable of avenging Kondo-san's name was deprived of his chance to do so, withering in his bed until his lungs had stopped completely. It took me a few days to piece myself back together. I was anxiously scrubbing a stain upon a small rectangular table when Sen and Kimigiku came to visit.
ごめんなさいね。しょっちゅうこうやって押しかけちゃって。迷惑だったら言ってちょうだい。
No, it's quite alright. You aren't disturbing me at all.
そう言ってくれると嬉しいわ。私、年が近い女友達っていなかったから。あの後、風間がここに来たりした？
No, I haven't seen him since.
そう。それならいいんだけど。あいつもあいつなりに、あの時のことを気にしているのかしら。ねえ、千鶴ちゃん、ちゃんとご飯食べてる？少し痩せたみたいだけど。
Don't worry. I haven't been feeling unwell or anything.
そう？それならいいんだけど。これからどうするか決めてる？もし行く場所がないなら、うちの里に来てくれていいのよ。
Well, it wasn't that I was unappreciative of Sen's show of concern, but... ごめんね. I haven't paid the thought any mind.
そう。
A pensive look covered Sen's face as her eyes scanned me, and she eventually glanced at Kimigiku. Wind rustled the branches of a tree beside my window.
そういえば千鶴さん、新選組の皆さん方のことを聞いてらっしゃいますか？
Kimigiku's question triggered my grief, and suddenly depression caused my knees to ache and tremble. In fact, it has. I learned of both Kondo-san's and Okita's passing.
やはりご存知でしたか。では、土方さんや他の大使さん方が宇都宮で戦ってらしたことは？
What?
はい。戦場で誠の大旗を掲げ、真っ先に敵陣に切り込んでいく姿は兵たちの語り草となっているようです。
Kimigiku's revelation caught me somewhat off guard. To the Shinsengumi, Kondo-san had served as an irreplaceable icon, a symbol of its greatest values and its unrelenting moral fiber. For Hijikata-san, I was sure that his devastating absence produced a hole too great to fill. Losing someone great was a grueling rite of passage. I couldn't begin to imagine how Hijikata-san could muster the will to fight, let alone lead a battalion of men against seemingly impossible odds. As his closest comrades died, one by one, beside him, what had he been fighting for? A sudden compulsion took hold of me. I decided to search after the Shinsengumi.
行ってみる？合図に。
Huh? Sen, never the wise, had caught onto my expression.
おきく、それぐらいならできるわよね。
人目を盗んで合図に入るぐらいなら、さして難しくはありません。
But, are you sure? Would you really do that for me?
水臭いこと言わないでちょうだい。私たち友達でしょ。それに光道さんや風間を止められなかった責任は八瀬一族の長たる私にもあるから。
Sen, I cannot begin to thank you enough. October. There's still an Aizu about to leave for Sendai or in Sendai. And so we begin the arduous journey from Edo to Aizu. With Kimigiku's assistance, we had relative ease sneaking out of Edo, avoiding detection under the scrutiny of the Imperial Army's patrol units. Although entering Aizu was another story entirely, considering that cannon fire and decomposing bodies were reducing the once lush domain to ruin. By the time we reached the castle town surrounding Aizu, it was October of 1868, in full autumnal swing.
Okiku, なかなか戻ってこないわね。何かあったのかしら?
Much to our dismay, the Aizu, like those before them, had offered their terms of surrender to the Imperial Army once their battered forces began to wane. After years of supporting the Shinsengumi, the mighty Aizu domain had fallen, just in time for our arrival. It was another demoralizing blow, and my heart yearned to comfort the Shinsengumi men whose hopes were becoming dashed in a matter of months. Rubble and bullet shells cracked underneath my feet.
あ、おきく。
姫様、千鶴さん。遅くなってしまってすみませんでした。
いいのよ。それよりも、どうだったの？新選組の人たちは。
大使さん方の行方が分かりました。
I gulped, waiting intently for her status report.
まず、3番組組長だった斉藤さんは、先日ボナリ峠の戦いで行方知れずとなっています。
Missing in action is a way to phrase it, yes.
生死は確認されておりませんが、お姿がないということはおそらく。
Saito-san is... Saito, one of the Shinsengumi's most gifted and courageous swordsmen, lost his life in battle? The news hit me like a bolt of lightning, giving me no reprieve as I felt the urge to faint from shock.
千鶴ちゃん、大丈夫？
大丈夫. Please, pay no attention to me. And what of the others, Kimikiku?
旧幕府軍の皆さん方はすでに仙台へと向かっているとのことです。おそらく船に乗って蝦夷地を目指すつもりではないでしょうか。
蝦夷？
この日の本の最北端にある場所よ。そこで負ければ次はないわ。
Which could only mean this war of attrition was reaching its threshold, and in Aizu, all could potentially come crashing down.
千鶴ちゃん、蝦夷地に行きたいのね。
I was entwined in the Shinsengumi's myth, having been a part of their ranks for nearly 4 years. I wanted to witness for myself how that myth would end, and how the lives of those who were there to shape it would eventually do so. Missing it would have been a disservice to myself, so I nodded curtly towards Sen.
どうしようかしらね。朝廷にはそれなりに顔が利くんだけど、今のあそこはちょっとね。蝦夷地に行くってことになると、異国の船を使うことになるでしょうし、さすがにそっちにはつてが。
If it's too much to ask for, Sen, then perhaps I can try negotiating a way to travel for myself.
いえ、なんとかしてみせるわ。もしかしたら少し時間はかかるかもしれないけど。
早急に仙台でどこか滞在できる場所を探さなくてはなりませんね。
そうね。手配はお願いするわ。
Sendai, we arrive. Kimikiku arranged for us to stay in a modest homestead, situated discreetly within a nearby hamlet in Sendai. Locating a suitable vessel had been, just as Sen had forewarned, a far more challenging task. Our search turned from days into weeks, and soon the tall, thick trees were emptied of their leaves as the autumn quickly morphed into a harsh winter. We were left with no choice but to sit idly, waiting for next year's spring to emerge before traveling north. 1869 June. Oh no. Why this music? Summer 1869.
千鶴ちゃんいる？
Sen, what's the matter? You sound panicked.
とうとう私たちを乗せてくれる船が見つかったのよ。
What? Really?
ええ、あいつにだけは頼りたくなかったんだけど、背に腹は変えられないわ。
Eh? Who do you mean? Two figures towered behind Sen, cloaked in shadows until their malicious grins took shape in the light of my lantern. I am not happy about this sentence at all.
ヤセの女鬼がどうしても我々に頼みたいことがあるというものでな。
Fuck! Kazuma! Amagiri!
薩摩藩のつてを使えば、蝦夷地行きの船に乗るのもそう難しくはないと思ってね。
今回の話を受ければ、人の世界の歴史に関与した我々の罪を不問とするという取引を持ちかけられたものだ。
Well, a trade for a trade. Ah, I see. Never in 1,000 years had I ever imagined Kazuma or Amagiri to come in our time of need.
息災のようだな、雪村の娘。
No, you stay quiet, sir. Ah, brother.
あの時はあのまま行動の後を追っても不思議ではないと思っていたが、意外と気丈なたちだし。
彼女のことを心配してたって素直に言えばいいのに。相変わらずひねくれてるわね。
誰が心配などするか。
I couldn't shake the image of Kazuma sneering over my father's lifeless body, which was a source of huge conflict as I stared at him angrily. But I had to take what I could get. Arigato. With your help, Kazuma, I stand a chance of being reunited with the rest of the Shinsengumi. Sen gulped awkwardly, perhaps taken aback by my meager efforts of saving face in front of Kazuma. Is something wrong, Sen? She seemed hesitant to answer, and her eyes darted around the room sheepishly. Kazuma, however, spared no additional moments, wallowing in the room's thick tension.
奴らにはおそらく会えん。
What? For some reason, I couldn't hear a thing. My heart's insistent pounding saw to that. What do you mean? We were able to acquire a ship, right? I panicked, and my hands felt clammy as I spoke. Kazuma averted his gaze initially, which was a more appropriate answer than he could ever offer.
5月18日、蝦夷共和国の函館政府は明治新政府に降伏した。
My vision went blurry as I let his words sink in. The Shinsengumi was defeated? After enduring wave after wave of terrible losses and being uprooted from their homes, the Shinsengumi fought on, but in the end, it was all for naught.
どうする？ 蝦夷地に行っても新選組の人たちには会えないかもしれないけど、このまま江戸に戻っても構わないのよ。あなたが決めていいと思うわ。
Sun gazed at me with gentle, sympathetic eyes. I'm going. I must witness for myself what remains of them, if anything.
そう、分かったわ。
The vessel took 2 brutal months to reach Ezel, during which my mind conjured no shortage of gruesome thoughts concerning the fate of my friends. Cosma, in a stunting act of kindness, had a Western uniform especially designed for me. I appreciated his generosity, though it was about 4 years too late, and I stared into the sparkly horizon. At the time of our arrival upon Ezel's shores, we were in the middle of a sweltering summer. I had to take some comfort, however, in the lack of humidity in contrast to an Edo or Kyo summer. From what I have been told, war have ravaged the town of Goryokaku, located in Hakodate. The land was scorched entirely, standing as little more than cinders piled atop rusted artifacts of war. So this is where it all came to an end.
はい。ここで全てが終わったと聞いています。昨年末、彼らが蝦夷地へ来た時は3000人の兵を擁していたと聞きますが、新政府軍との戦いが始まった時には兵の数は2000人に減っていたそうです。新政府軍がこの蝦夷地を制圧するために投入した兵の数は5万人。旧幕府軍の敗北は戦う前から明らかでした。
Thanks to Kimikiku's tireless investigating, I became privy of the timeline of events as they occurred in Ezel. May 20th, 1869, Imperial forces reached the coast of Ezel. June 20th, 1869, war between the Imperials and the government of Hakodate began. June 23rd, 1869, the resistance fighters surrendered at Benton's fortress. A total of 92 men surrendered at Benton. Among them were 13 Shinsengumi warriors. June 27, 1869, Goryokaku, the last remaining stronghold, offered their terms of surrender to the Imperial Army. Do you have any idea what became of Hijikata-san? I held my breath as I awaited her answer, knowing full well that the answer could knock the wind out of me. Kimikiko gazed blankly at my shyly posed question, biting her lip in hesitation before answering.
5月11日の総攻撃の日に戦死なさったそうです。弁天台場にいる大使さん方を救出しようとして銃で撃たれたと。
Hijikata-san died. I bit my tongue, keeping myself from sobbing madly. The demon commander, the Shinsengumi's seemingly invincible paragon, had lost his life. I never thought the day would ever come. Just then, a warm gust of wind tickled my cheeks, carrying with it a familiar totem that crossed my line of sight. As I realized what it was, I gasped. It landed upon the floor, covered in soot, and my hands shook as I held it in the center of my palm. It was a tattered Makoto flag. It was the dying ember of an age gone by, proof of the Shinsengumi's heroism on these sacred lands. I had shed few tears for anyone other than my father in the last year, but this time it was unavoidable. The Shinsengumi had eluded me for too long. I had never managed to catch them, and it felt as every opportunity was merely the ghost of thought. Now they were elsewhere, far beyond where I could ever reach them. I flicked tears from my cheeks with my right thumb.
千鶴ちゃん、大丈夫？
I couldn't say any more. Sun tilted her head upwards, staring longingly at the open sky as she muttered to me softly.
新選組の人たちがずっと戦いをやめなかったのはなぜなのかしらね。審判大名や不代大名、徳川家の将軍でさえ途中で戦うことを諦めてしまったというのに。
I was only in their care for a short amount of time. I found it difficult to speak in their stead, and in this moment I reflected upon the sounds of their voices. There was one thing, however, that I knew for sure. At the very least, none of them chased any hollow pursuits like nobility, public renown, or recognition amongst their peers.
きっとそうね。
I turned to face the sky, watching the clouds bunch in formations overhead. One thing I cherished was how, in gazing towards the sky, it reminded me of their light blue kimonos. I was reminded of their struggles, their laughter. Regardless of how the world around them changed, they remained steadfast in their convictions. Upholding values upon penalty of death was no mean feat. Even so, they defied all the odds, rising above the restriction of class and marital material to forge something greater as an honest indication of their best selves. Kono-san epitomized this more than anyone, transcending the limitations he had been born with in the pursuit of a dream, becoming a true samurai. Ichikata-san, the Shinsengumi's rugged, curt disciplinarian, was another example of what set them apart from factions of other power-hungry mercenaries. Okita, who possessed an unparalleled talent for swordsmanship, had been aptly given the title of the Sword of the Shinsengumi. Saito-san, a shy gentleman of few words, let his sword do the talking, and had always been a man of his word. Teisuke was a bubbly soul whose wit and candor far exceeded his youthful appearance. Harada-san, the group's frank, charismatic ladies' man, had charm and leadership down in spades. Nagakura, full of energy and sake, symbolized the brotherly love that the Shinsengumi valued most. Sanan-san sacrificed his humanity to fight alongside the Shinsengumi as one of the leaders of its Fury Corps. Yamazaki-san, a thoughtful, timid ninja who served as the Shinsegumi's shadow, had assisted me on numerous occasions to broaden my medical expertise. Inoue was one of the first Shinsengumi men that I had met, and the memory of his joyful smile still gives me comfort in moments of weakness. Shimada, a hulking warrior with a heart of gold and a sweet tooth like no other, and a gentle bellow. Soma, the group's proud, diligent page, shed his Ronin persona to follow in Kodo-san's footsteps. Nomura never failed to bring levity to a situation and help to maintain the dignity of the Shinsengumi. This truly was farewell. My cheeks felt rosy, and not just from the bite of wind. If I were to close my eyes, I swore that I could still hear the busy chatter of their voices. So once more I shut my eyes in silence. The achievement is I promised I wouldn't cry, but I'm crying! They gave Yamazaki the blue Haori. Hi, I'm not okay! Yukimura threw it clear, all by myself. Fuck you, achievement system! Okay. Oh, God. Oh, it hurts! It was just reading, but it hurts! It was the ending CG that got me, that's why. Oh my God. Ugh. Give me a moment. Okay. Light is suffering. Light is suffering. Ugh. Oh god, okay. It's suffering hours. And we're about to suffer more! Because that is way too short. I could end it there, but I'm not gonna. But I'm gonna make myself cry even more. Because we got the game overs and the unrequited loves to do. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna work backwards. Because that's fun. Which means I'm gonna suffer with Best Boy first, because let's get that out of the way. And we're gonna start it from Edo Blossom, because we're already on Edo Blossom, so we might as well add to everything. So, let me just get the guide. Alright. Let's go ahead and do the game overs first. Records of service. And we're obviously going to be button mashing. We don't need to read anything. Well, we're going to read a little bit. Till the end of the scene of whatever choice. Chapter 1. Low romance. And high corruption. Alright. It's time to button mash till we get to our choices. Am I okay? No. Never okay. Light is not okay after this whole thing. Oops. Right, we got this button. I forget it exists! Ugh. I said, nothing. Ugh. He left me no chance to respond and scurried away. Yamazaki-san's eagerness to escape made it so he couldn't see me on the verge of speaking. Perhaps he had been purposefully avoiding a conversation with me. Did anything happen while the two of you were out? I wonder what Hijikata-san could have been referring to. I stared back at Hijikata-san with a dubious expression, which prompted him to continue speaking. Do you think that'd be okay? Understood. Thank you. I bowed to Hijikata-san, to which he responded with a flick of his hand, before rushing to the kitchen. It was unlike Yamazaki-san to flee so sheepishly, which led me to question if everything was okay. had the foresight. Yeah, we... Yamazaki-san appeared in far better spirits, beaming as he put his nose towards the food and wafted in his sense before bowing respectfully towards me. I think we could skip this. No, yeah, we've seen this before. I'm still recovering from the ending. I decided to make him endure it. Yamazaki was eyeing the arteries in my neck longingly. In all honesty, it frightened me to the core. Being stared at like a morsel to a predator was enough for me to freeze in place. Someone who I deeply admired was suffering, but I could barely muster any courage to help him. I was so ashamed for letting my feelings dictate the matter, but Yamazaki-san curled his lips into a grin. There was an amiable quality to his apology, as if he were speaking to a young crying child. What had I been doing? I was so inspired by his words of reassurance that I broke into a sprint, hugging him from behind. Why had I let my fear take hold of me? All this time, Yamazaki-san had always been the first person to look after my well-being and protect me. I'm so sorry, Yamazaki-san. Please forgive me. I embraced his back, constricting him as tightly as I could just to remain close to him. Deep inside my heart, I hoped that my presence was enough to help ease Yamazaki-san's potent suffering. Its pain had gone on just a little while longer. By morning, Yamazaki-san's onset had almost completely disappeared, and he regained his composure. February was drawing to a close. We rode the way of sparkling sunshine to the wintry morning, caressing us with a chill, tingling breeze.
いやいや、こうしてみんなと会うと、ずいぶん長く留守にしていた気がするな。
気がするなじゃねえよ、近藤さん。実際何ヶ月ぶりだと思ってんだ。
Oops. And on we go! Da 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 da. So what is the first game over screen? Is it Kofu? It has to be Kofu, right? Never mind, I might be wrong. So we go with dot dot dot. How does this become a game over for us? Ichikata-san was prithee in delivering his orders, to which I could do nothing but fall silent. My position here was rather painfully reaffirmed. I had no place on the battlefield, nor had I developed any prowess as a swordsman. It would have been uncouth of me to ask simply because I desired to stay close to Yamazaki-san. My heart, so it seemed, couldn't be helped. Yamazaki-san's fingers gently tapped my shoulders before he spoke up.
副長、東堂さん、俺からも一つ言わせてください。俺はこたびの戦に雪村君を連れて行くべきだと思います。 山崎君本気で言ってんの？千鶴は戦えねえんだぞ。戦えずともできることはあります。刀を振るっての戦いが全てではない。以前とある人が教えてくれた言葉です。
Were those my words? We can skip ahead to this. It is the same scene. Da 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 da. Ba-ba-ba-da-ba-da. Wait, hold on. Hold on. Wait, hold on. Let's rewind. After that night, everything fell into place quickly. An influx of new recruits were being trained. Munitions, many of which I had never seen before, were being carted in and around the compounds. The Koryo Regulatory Company was hastily organizing its affairs, scrambling to prepare for the impending convoy to Kofu. When the day finally arrived, it was hard to believe. As I was neatly arranging my clothing for the trip to into a big bag, Sana-san stopped by my room to visit, sharing with me a surprise bit of news. What? Sana-san, what did you just say?
山崎君は残ることになりました。紅葉鎮部隊には同行しません。土方君もこのことは承知しています。なんなら確認してもらっても構いませんよ。
Wait, I wasn't told about this. But why? Why would he change his mind all of a sudden?
どうしても何もないでしょう。彼は羅刹隊、新選組の影。新選組の表部隊に同行しようということ自体間違いなのですよ。
But just the other day.
雪村先輩、何をしているんですか？
もう先発隊が動き出してるぞ。
我々や山崎君の分まで頑張ってきてくださいね。それでは失礼いたします。
Without another word, Sana-san skipped out of my room. I had been informed of Heisuke's orders to remain, but this had completely blindsided me.
おい、雪村先輩、俺たちも早く行かねえと置いてかれちまう。
I'll be going now. After the Koryo Regulatory Company's departure, terrifying rumors swept through Edo, detailing stories of brutal murders carried out in the dead of night. The victims, innocent townspeople, found with pale white skin and wounds on their necks. The thread connecting to each of the murders was the sighting of someone dressed in black, skin-tight ninja attire fleeing the scene. I never said goodbye, or saw him since then. Well, that's one game over. Let's start the second game over. Records of service. And you know, the thing with it is low romance, high corruption. But And now we skip. Ma. I'll get there. Don't worry. So, instead he fixed his hateful glare upon the corpses of his enemies, warping his mouth into a menacing grin, which prompted me to say, "Handle the enemies!" Understood. Yamazaki-san was right. Unless the perimeter was safe, treating our wounded ally would do him no good. I gulped, realizing that I was in no position to dispute. Okay, but please, as soon as you're done fighting, I'm going to need your help treating him. Splotches of blood stuck to Yamazaki-san's pale face, and he sprung around to continue fighting. My stomach looked queasy. Was any of this okay? As I watched him hack through the group of fleeing Imperial stragglers, he seemed distant, miles from me, despite being only a few feet away. I shook my head and shut my eyes, hoping the vision of a thoughtless murderer would leave me. As he promised, however, Yamazaki-san made quick work out of the Imperials. In spite of my best efforts, the wounded Shinsengumi warrior succumbed to his wounds, and I saw the glimmer of light leave his scared, tender eyes. As I lifted my head, I couldn't help but gasp, catching sight of the gruesome mountain of human remains scattered along the dirt. The one who was responsible was a fury huffing in a damp coat of blood. He had thrown his mask off from his face, his lips curling into a wry, satisfied smile. In no way had Yamazaki-san seemed disturbed by his actions. On the contrary, he was taking great pleasure. Yamazaki-san, they're all... Stop it! And from here, I think we're okay to press this button. Make him endure. Yamazaki-san scowled devilishly before turning his back towards me. I seized the opportunity, lunging forward with my arms outstretched to hug his body tightly. No, I'm not letting go. If I had let him consume blood, then perhaps his humanity would have begun to wilt away. So I held on to him desperately, drawing him in closer to let him know that I supported him. It was a wholehearted sentiment. Although I knew that I would never experience the agony that plagued him, at least he knew that I cared. After it felt as though an eternity had passed, at last Yamazaki began to resemble himself again, letting the sword fall from his hands before speaking. Alright. Wait. Okay, yeah, that's all the same. You are a human. Part of me wondered if I had any place to speak. More than anything else, I'd wanted to counter his depressing sentiment and say whatever came to mind. That's not true at all. You are a human. Yamazaki-san's mouth was agape, and his eyes stared at the ground, speechless. I decided to give him a moment to reprieve. In this moment, perhaps he hadn't needed words of comfort. Instead, I glanced at the darkening sky, collecting my erstwhile thoughts. Had Kondo-san been able to escape safely? Saito-san, Harada, Nagakura, and Shimada. All of the men who were willing to give their lives so that we could protect Kondo-san. Were they alive? Yamazaki-san, let's go. We need to rendezvous with the rest of the Shinsengumi men. We picked ourselves back up, dragging our heavy feet through singularity muck, when all of a sudden... Hi, I don't know what's gonna change. I'm gonna... press this button. Where is this gonna go wrong? This might be the part where it goes wrong. Yamazaki-san bent forward, prepping himself to lunge before his pupils flared in dilation. He kicked at the floor, disappearing into thin air. It was impossible for me to track his superhuman movements with the naked eye. All I could follow was the whistle of the wind against the tree branches he'd fluttered upon. Sorry! It's fine. That is a horrible sound for swinging your arm. I don't like it. I didn't like it the last time we had this scene. I don't like it now. What? No! Yamazaki dashed away at light speed, leaving behind the ominous glow of his rage-filled eyes. A sense of urgency fueled his movements, but it was nefarious, akin to panic more than determination. My eyes started towards Amagiri, whose body was engulfed in a whirlwind of steel. Blood cascaded like floating lilies from the demon's body as Yamazaki-san's flurry slashes cut almost every part of him, save for his face and neck. Suddenly, Amagiri's hair turned stark white. And then... the tip of Yamazaki-san's katana was pointed directly at Amagiri's heart. His opportunity to strike was cut short, however. With a slight pick of his wrist, been through this. Here's a change. Yamazaki-san shoved me off of him, and it was clear that my concern was the furthest thing from his mind. I doubted that, if it were me standing opposite him with my kodachi unsheathed, he wouldn't give a second hesitation before rushing to kill me. Ugh. Yamazaki-san, why?
これが貴様らが頼った力の末路だ。間違っていると知りつつも戻れぬとは、新選組の末路を暗示しているようだ。もう構わんな、天城。ええ。彼にとっては、これが唯一の救いとなるでしょうか。
It happened in the blink of an eye. Kazuma jerked his arm back and pierced his katana through Yamazaki-san's heart. Mouthfuls of blood began frothing from Yamazaki-san's lips. His shoulders folded inwards as he coughed. Yamazaki-san. All of the feeling in my body left. I couldn't grasp what was happening in front of me, so I crumpled to the floor on my knees in depression. In desperation, but also depression. I stared intently at Yamazaki-san, whose limp and lifeless body laid over a widening pool of his own blood.
Yukimura Chizuru, お前には二つの道がある。一つは我々と共に来ること。 我らはお前を腹からとして迎え入れ、決して無下にはせぬと誓おう。そしてもう一つは、この愚か者の仇を討つことだ。
Kazuma shifted his eyes leftwards at Amagiri, prompting his partner to nod in return. I stood still as Kazuma shot me a chilling glance. And spun around and began walking away from me.
お前がどちらを選ぼうと構わない。だが仇を討つなら、その時は容赦はしない。
Despite his thinly veiled threats, my mind was the furthest place from the ultimatum he described. I hadn't even considered running after them. The only thing swirling in my mind was the lucid color of Yamazaki-san's blood. The least I could do for him in this solemn moment was to pray for his soul, alone in the frigid darkness. I stood there, clasping my hands tightly, waiting until the frost took me with him. Well, time for game over number 3. All right, we know this. Low romance and high corruption. Let's go. And we have to make him endure it. I could tell, judging by the way his face was warping, that Yamazaki-san's pain was only intensifying. Just as I attempted to contemplate my options. Out of reflex, Yamazaki-san began pounding his bare fist into a nearby building repeatedly. His knuckles split, bursting blood through broken skin. How terrible, I imagined. His suffering must have been for him to self-inflict pain as a form of distraction. Please, stop, Yamazaki-san! You're hurting yourself! After a minute of beating his hand senselessly into oblivion, I felt his muscles relax in my lap. Now we continue this one, and then we're gonna meet Ibuki in a second. Here he is. Allies. Was that man a Shinsengumi warrior? As soon as the question left my mouth, Yamazaki-san formed a wry smile, and with his thin lips.
本人が聞いたら否定するだろうな。俺は大使なんかじゃないって。強いて言えば、そうだな。ある意味で今の君に似た立場だったよ。あいつ、伊吹と俺が出会ったのは君と出会うよりもさらに前。新選組がまだ老子組と呼ばれていた頃、今日の都で新選組の黎明期を共に過ごした、いわば昔の仲間ということなんだな。
Yamazaki-san gazed longingly at the sky above us, watching the star patterns twinkle brightly. His voice trailed off, causing me to ponder what may have caused a rift between Ibuki and the Shinsengumi. I wonder how he settled all the way here in Edo.
伊吹と俺たちの道はとうの昔に分かたれたんだ。俺たちは誇りと共に戦う道を選び、あいつは血塗られた道に背を向けて日の当たる世界へ戻っていった。あいつが無事に生きているならそれ以上のことは望まない。
Alright. It'll be after this, we'll be at the confrontation. Alright, we learned about Kondo-san. Now we're gonna go and try to rescue him. Come on. Where's the change?
局長をおとなしく返してくれるなら、
そういう近藤さん。おお、私のここもラン。俺が。
何？巻き込むのに躊躇はないか。
Da da da! The poisons are in the scalpels. Oh no! Alright, he's looking at me. He's looking at me.
さて、千鶴。これから羅刹体を大きくするために。
What do you want from me?
大丈夫。ただ、毎日死なない。もちろんだ。改良が進めば 日の光も恐れず不死のからいわば千鶴は
You.
まあそうだ毎日欠かす
Attempted to lift his body from the ground. Nope.
やめるさあ
Ah, there it is.
何
なんだこいつ
新選組新選組一番組組長沖田総司
Okita?
どうしてあなたがここにはあまるでボロ雑巾だねそれでも新選組の大使かな山崎君
Do Okita and Yamazaki not got along in real life? That's something I need to know. Like, I genuinely want to know this.
僕がここに来た理由は久々だけど行動
ですが君の話は今も立っているの
さあね
あら
Alright.
バカな
決まってるでしょそんなものな死に損なって瀕死の何ぼーっとしてるの千鶴ちゃん山崎君を連れて早く逃げなよ
You expect me to leave you here, Okita?
戦えない君と瀕死の山崎君がここに残って何か意味があるのかなはっきり言って足手まといなんだよ
Okita called it this was my concern, turning his back towards us before addressing me softly.
言うことを聞きなよ千鶴ちゃん聞けるわけがないでしょ
Yamazaki-san rose from the floor meekly, wobbling his limbs in a feeble attempt to support his own weight.
俺の役目は新選組の象徴である近藤局長を何としてでも守り抜くことですから彼女を巻き込んでもそれは
Stop worrying about me. Prepare to accept that risk, come what may. Actually, I made this decision ages ago. Whatever path Yamazaki-san chooses, no matter the circumstances, is going to be mine as well. Even if it means confronting death head-on.
二人揃ってここまでバカだとは思わなかったな何を言うかと思えばバカなのは内田さんも一緒でしょ刀を振るうこともやっとなのに草が出るなどとバカそのものです相変わらず口が悪いね山崎君は
The scent of blood thickened the tense, humid air. Whoops. However, neither Okita nor Yamazaki-san seemed fazed. After trading insults, the two shared a playful grin. Considering how astute the current situation was, we had nothing to gain from tearing each other apart.
じゃあ行こうか二人とも雪村君決して俺から離れないでくれ
The moment Okita leapt, fury swarmed us like flies to rancid meat. I unsheathed my kodachi and braced myself. As the horde rushed in, I held my breath. Giving up wasn't an option, but hope was scant. There was a time for crying and a time for bravery. that ends. Our fate? Dead. More than likely, anyway. And now, onto the bad ending. Not the unrequited love ending, because that one hurts like fuck. But the bad ending. Alright. Chapter 4. We are doing low romance, high corruption. It's time for the skip bud. He is no longer my father. You know, I realized something at Itabashi. The man I used to recognize as father is gone. His smile, his laugh, all of it had been forced. I think the man he used to be died a long time ago. That's why I'm determined to fight. I no longer see him as my father. Well, we'd better get moving. I think there's a lot for us to do before we hit the road. I exhaled a deep breath, preparing myself to stand as I noticed Yamazaki-san in the corner of my eyes. His eyes were shifty, almost evasive, and he remained still despite my segue. Is something wrong?
Yoshi.
Yeah, this is the same. Wait. Is it the same? Yeah, it is the same. Make him endure it, yeah. Are you in pain?
いや、違うんだ。今は別に苦しいわけじゃない。
Yamazaki-san stood up in a frenzy, hastily pacing before he fled from the room. I suppose I spoke too soon. Yamazaki-san hadn't needed to consume my blood after all. I was curious as to why he was behaving so weirdly. The night was gorgeous in moonlit. And now we go.
さて、行く前に君に頼みというか願いがある。
Sure, anything.
その君のことを下の名で呼んでも構わないだろうか。
Oh, that's different. Do you mean?
ああ、一生後悔すると言っていた願いだ。ありがとう、雪村君。いや、千鶴。では、行こう。
Now we can move along. Use them is what we should say. My mind was flushed with stressful thoughts. More than anything, our emphasis needed to be upon ensuring victory in these drastic circumstances. Father cannot be allowed to succeed. Amagiri mentioned the Fury powers had no place in human conflict, but somehow they were an affront to him and our country. However, I find that to be more of a reason to use them despite these desperate times called for desperate measures, and we'd be foolish to give ourselves a disadvantage.
ああ、できれば使いたくないな。敵は俺と同じ闇に落ちた存在なのだから。
After confirming our position, Yamazaki-san and I slink through the rest of the castle, nervously poking our heads around the corner to avoid being noticed. We hid in the shadows, holding our breaths as we snuck away from moonlit areas in the hallway. Da 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 da. There he is.
見つけたぞ。
おや、まさか。
Ah! Oh, okay. Here comes the Furies. They're coming for me, Yamazaki. Well, I got... Hey! Hey! Well, I got Father distracted. Take him out! I needed to draw all of the Furies' attention. Two Furies, their lips wet with drool, began slowly sauntering towards me, prompting me to step back. A raspy voice murmured behind me, and I turned around to face it out of reflex. It was... Countless red eyes shone through the darkness. 2, 4, 6, 8. Ah! I became intimidated, thrashing wildly with my short blade as a bevy of hands came out to grab me. My kodachi, however, was snatched from my hands in an instant. Then, all of the Furies pounced on me. Their salivating mouths tore my bloody appendage apart as they sunk their teeth into my flesh without abandon. My arms and chest were forcefully pinned, and they restrained my legs to ensure I couldn't kick out. Through gritted teeth, I shook my head, shutting my eyes to refrain from witnessing their terrifying maws. I wanted to block everything from sight, as I knew that my fate had been decided. As much as I wanted to reject this reality, I couldn't. Escape was an impossibility. Suddenly, there was a pause. The creepy sensation of their tongues lapping my skin made my hair stand, flicking aimlessly for a drop of blood. In my heart, however, I held onto a bleak hope. Surely Yamazaki-san could still come and rescue me. I was certain of it. No matter how long I'd waited, however, Yamazaki-san's voice eluded me. Eventually, I stopped waiting. In fact, I stopped thinking at all. That is one hell of a bad ending, but let's do the unrequited love then, shall we? Chapter 4. Low romance and low corruption is your recipe for the unrequited love ending. For this one, it's, he's no longer my father. Yes, he's no longer my father. We read this. Give him blood. We've seen this. And we're gonna get the best kiss scene in the fucking game. Again, enjoy. Which everywhere, I think. There doesn't seem to be any guards overseeing the perimeter. Alright. Keep going. The answer is use them. No, there are furies everywhere. Alright. Whoops. Okay, let's start from here. I'll be okay. Forget about me. You handle my father. I saw the glint of hesitation twinkle in Yamazaki-san's tender eyes as he saw the Furies closing in on me. Considering my lack of prowess in battle, I too knew that I couldn't keep the Furies at bay for long. But thankfully, it hadn't come to that. Yamazaki-san made his decision swiftly, racing towards me with a fervor in his wistful face. In an instant, crimson filled his eyes, and his hair became a stark shade of white. Unfortunately, the poison in his arms hadn't quite worn off, making his arm movements sluggish. Only through sheer force of will could he move. Yeah. Yamazaki-san howled as he yanked the scalpel driven into his shoulder from his bleeding flesh. Then, I couldn't help but cover my mouth in shock. Yamazaki-san's eyes glowed ominously, and like a beast attacking its prey, he struck further in the larynx with the used scalpel. There was no need to verify if Father survived. As soon as Father's body hit the floor with a thud, Yamazaki-san leapt towards me, angrily hacking at the Furies beside me until they were a mess of limbs. As other Furies became privy to the scent of fresh blood, Yamazaki-san made short work of them, bouncing atop the hall's tables to sever their exposed heads. By the end of their skirmish, he was drenched in blood, slaughtering his enemies with aplomb. Yamazaki-san turned to look at me, battered and drained, and we quietly walked out of the castle. Our steps echoed in the halls of Shirakawa Castle, and as we made our exit, we were greeted with a large, incandescent ray of moonlight through the clouds. Yamazaki-san let out a calm sigh and walked towards a knoll in the castle's left, leaning his back against an old tree. Are you okay, Yamazaki-san? Of course, the battle is over. I followed after him, tilting my head up towards the blank face of the moon. It was an engulfing light, warming without the heat, but soothing to the eyes. Moonlight wrapped us like a blanket, sheltering us from the atrocities we had just recently seen. Of course they did. We stopped my father, and now the Shinsengumi won't have to fight against Furies. All they have to do is beat forwards, continuing their fight so long as they still can. His eyelids drooped slowly, and with his chin, he pointed towards a trail leading towards the forest.
経緯を伝えてきてくれないか。
Why don't you want to do it, Yamazaki-san?
悪いが、俺はまだ動けそうもない。もう敵もいなくなったことだし、ここで休んで待っているよ。
Just wait here, and I'll make sure that they bring you some treatment, okay? Just take deep breaths. I nodded, standing up towards the direction that Yamazaki-san had pointed me. But I was fretful, unable to shake my despair. An unsettling chill brushed my cheeks from the mountain air, and I turned to glance at Yamazaki-san. I caught sight of a faint smile forming in the corner of his lips, illuminated by moonlight.
できれば振り返らず言ってほしかったんだな。君は本当に困った子だな。
Yamazaki-san? For some reason, his eyes went blank. A gesture of fragility that inspired fear inside of me. My chest tightened, feeling like a dull knife was being pressed against it. And as I took one step back towards him, he motioned me to stop.
どうかそのまま言ってくれ。君の記憶にある俺は最後まで笑顔でいてほしいんだ。
Once more, he meekly curled his lips into a grin. A gust of wind bit my soft cheeks. I stood there speechless, listening to the whistle of wind through the tall grass as I stared at Yamazaki. The traces of moonlight glowing in Yamazaki-san's wistful eyes faded, and so had the life inside of them. He was kissed by the moon, undiscorded by the hovering battle only hours beforehand. Yamazaki-san. Without realizing it, hot tears formed in the back of my eyelids, streaming down my face before being carried by the twilight winds. Then darkness. Overcast clouds gathered above us, casting a shadow over Yamazaki-san's resting body. Nothing else mattered to me. I waited idly, watching the time slip from my fingers as the wind settled. My best buddy died, carried by the twilight winds. Ah! And as we have reached the 2-hour mark, I think that is enough for today. Tonight, there's more SSL, as we dub through Saito's route, and having fun and having our soundboards and everything. Tomorrow, 3 p.m. EST, we're coming back. We're doing the rest of the things, and hopefully that means I can get all the achievements in the games. So we're doing the game overs, the bad endings, and the unrequited loves, which are gonna hurt as much as these. Trust me. And if we're done with Edo Blossoms, we'll then go and do, Kyoto Winds, because I haven't unlocked everything in that one, apparently. So we're gonna do that as well. No SSL for the next 2 days as well. So Sunday, Monday, no SSL, but we will be doing Hakuoki stuff. And then, when we're done with all of that, when everything is done and complete, I'm gonna take a month off. So I can do some editing and scripting. Don't worry, we'll come back. But we'll come back with very small streams. So by small, I mean we're going to edit Ties of Fates together. So you guys can see how I edit audio and stuff like that. And if you want to enjoy it, you can. And then we're going to be putting it all together. Once that is done, we'll come back with some Cyberpunk. Or if I find time, we'll do Cyberpunk. Alright? That's our plan. That is our plan. But we gotta finish the rest of Hakuoki. So with that, I implore you to drink water. Have a good day or night. Don't die because you didn't drink water. And I'll see you next time. Or later tonight, I guess. Bye-bye. Whoops.